puttana! Hai messo la nostra vita e il nostro orgoglio nelle sue mani! Sei peggio di una puttana! E ti permetti pure di aprire bocca e parlarmi delle tue vigliaccherie con orgoglio!
L'ho amato, lo amo ancora con tutto il mio cuore!
Sputi veleno, la tua bocca è piena di fango!
Lasciami perdere! Vorrei essere con lui!
Ammazzo!
Cetro! Falla finita!
C'è disonorato, non se ne vergogna! È una puttana! Ehi, Venucci! Puttana!
No! No, Pietro!
Stand back! We have him at last!
Anything remarkable on hand, Lestrade?
No. Nothing in particular.
Then tell us about it.
Now you come to mention it, Mr. Holmes, there's no denying there is something on my mind.
Burglary.
Exactly. The house of a Dr. Barneycott was broken into. He had put it in his house. The other he put 2 miles away in his surgery. Later that same night.
Committed to an ancestor during the Napoleonic Wars. He might form an E-Day fix, and under its influence, he might be capable of any fantastic outrage.
My dear Watson, that won't do. Observe, there is a certain method in this gentleman's eccentric madness. I mean, for example, where there was less danger of alarm, it was smashed where it stood.
I only mention it because you usually have a taste for all that is out of the common, no matter how trivial.
No, I dare call nothing trivial, Lestrade. Some of my most classic cases have had the least promising commencement. So you see, I cannot afford to smile at your 3 busts, Lestrade.
Listen to this, Holmes. Come instantly. 131 Pitt Street, Kensington, Lestrade.
What's it about?
Well, it could be anything, but I suspect it's a sequel to his story of last night. You know, my E-Day fix. Finish your coffee. There's a...
It's attempted murder, at least.
Turn. This way.
You've told him, then?
Oh, not a word.
Now, tell us exactly what occurred.
Extraordinary thing. If I had been a journalist and walked in through that door, I would have interviewed myself and had 2 columns in every London newspaper. And here I am, giving away valuable copy by telling my story over and over again to a string of different people. However, I've heard of your name, Mr. Sherlock Holmes. So if you could explain this queer business, I'd be more than paid for my trouble in telling you my story.
we know who the murdered man was?
Not yet. But you can see the body at the mortuary if you wish.
Do we know what became of it?
The officer...
Well, the intruder had either very long legs or was the most active man, with that area beneath. It was no... Mr. Harker, will you come with us to see the remains of your bust?
I must make something of it, although I was the only journalist in that stand, and my journal was the only one that didn't have a published account.
Well? We have a long way to go, but there is one suggestive fact. He didn't smash this in the house or immediately outside it.
Well, perhaps he was so rattled and bustled by meeting this other fellow that he hardly knew what he was doing.
That's likely. Why not destroy it there?
Holmes?
Remember it. Docket it. We may come on something later which will bear upon it. Meanwhile, before we go our separate ways, I suggest we make one last concerted visit.
Where to?
The morgue.
They made nothing of his identity up to now. He was poorly dressed, but doesn't seem to have been a labourer.
Well, whoever's responsible did a nasty job on the fellow's throat.
Oh, that was a murder weapon. Had a serrated blade. Though whether it belonged to the murderer or the dead man, we don't yet know.
Anything in his pockets to help identify him?
Precious little. If it might interest you, Mr. Holmes.
Forgive me, Lestrade, I was just contemplating the one mystery that not even I can solve. Death itself.
Oh, part one, it's torn. Oh, what do you propose next, Lestrade?
Well, the most practical way of getting at it, in my opinion, is to identify the dead man. Once we know who he is and who his associates are, we should have a good start in learning who killed him on the doorstep of Mr. Horace Harker. Don't you think so, Mr. Holmes?
No doubt. It is not the way that I would conduct the case.
Oh, what would you do?
No, don't let me influence you, Lestrade. I suggest you follow your line of inquiry and I mine. Then we can compare notes. In each sudden homicidal lunatic with Napoleonic delusions at his house last night. I'm sure it will please Mr. Horace Harker and the subscribers. Until then, I would like to keep this photograph found in the dead man's pocket.
Oh, Mr.
Full copy of The Emperor's Head by Devine. Are you familiar by any chance with that great artiste?
Yes, indeed. Speaking of...
But he only stayed a week and then just disappeared. Didn't even collect his wages.
Perhaps he was responsible for the breakages.
Responsible for the breakages? Huh. Responsible for the breakages? My dear sir, this is an international conspiracy. A nihilist plot. Red Republicans, I call them. Yes, no one but an anarchist would go about breaking statues.
Did they break every one that you sold?
Break every one I sold? Well, hardly that. Just the two bought by a local doctor and the one left here in my shop. If anything happened to the other three, I know nothing of it.
3? So there were 6 to begin with?
6 to begin with? Yes, a batch of 6. I ordered them especially from Gelder and Company of Stepney. They do excellent moulding work.
Do you happen to know the names and addresses of the other customers?
My ledgers, Mr. Holmes, are confidential.
Mr. Hart.
And, who better to do that than Mr. Sherlock Holmes?
Mr. Sherlock Holmes. Yes, quite right, sir. Yes, the country slumbers, but we shall remain vigilant. Follow me, sir. We are. Mr. Josiah Brown of Chiswick.
Did your 2 busts differ in any way from the other 4?
Differ from the other 4? No.
As all the others?
The same as all the others? Well, I suppose so. But you'd have to apply direct to Gelder and Company to find that out. In person.
Excellent idea.
A gentleman. When you meet the manager, would you be good enough to warn him of the conspiracy? with all the busts.
We sell the busts without decoration. But Mr. Hudson ordered that the whole uniform be painted. It was expertly done and made it a very spectacle. Aber natürlich. Then they are placed in a special room to dry and are...
So, your interest in the molding process had ulterior motives. Herr Mendelstein, I wonder if you happen to recognize the man in this photograph.
Ah, the rascal.
Yes, indeed, I know very well. This has always been a respectable establishment, and the only time we ever had the police in here was over this fellow. About a year ago, he knifed another Italian in the street and ran in here with the police on his heels.
Was his name Beppo, by any chance?
Beppo, yes. His second name I never knew. Serve me right for employing a man with such a face. But he was a good workman, one of the best.
Do you happen to remember exactly when he was arrested?
I could check the pay lists.
According to Morse Hudson's records, you sold him 6 Napoleons on June the 3rd of last...
Would wish to speak with him?
No. Not a word to the cousin, I beg of you. The matter is very important, and the further I go with it, the more important it seems.
So, yeah, I really thought his cousin might know when Beppo is to be released.
Just 11 days.
Ach, du lieber Gott.
Please, sit down.
Oh, thank you. Well, what luck, Mr. Holmes?
We've had a very busy day.
It's Mr. Sherlock Holmes. Not for me to say a word against them, but I think I've done a better day's work than you. A respectable Italian tradesman, but involved with a secret political society.
Red anarchists?
Oh, you've been talking to Morse Hudson, haven't you?
Do go on, Lestrade.
I refer, of course, to the mafia, which, as you may know, enforces its decrees by assassination. Obviously, our murderer broke the rules in some fashion, and Pietro... petty larceny, 6 months at most. No. It's murder we're really investigating. We have an inspector who's made a speciality of the Italian quarter. I shall go down there with him, find the man in that photograph you're carrying, arrest him for murder. What you say, Mr. Holmes? Will you come with us?
I think not. I fancy Chiswick as the address most likely to find him.
Chiswick?
If you and some of your men will come with us to Chiswick tonight, I will go to the Italian quarter with you tomorrow, and there will be no harm in the delay. I suggest you dine with us. And then you're welcome to the sofa. A few hours' sleep will do us all good. I don't intend to leave the house before 11, and it is unlikely that we shall be home before morning.
But, Mr. Holmes...
In the meantime, I have a letter to send by express messenger. Mrs. Hudson! Mrs. Hudson!
No! Io.
Sono io il capofamiglia. È mio dovere.
Milan. 11 o'clock, gentlemen, on your feet. Come along, Lestrade. Watson, I think you've been over-generous with the port.
You've been frugal enough with your information.
That will be our four-wheeler. Don't forget the revolver, Watson, and bring the rugs.
This outing wouldn't be inspired by your ID fix, would it?
E-day fix.
Yeah.
Rises.
I'm not a betting man, Mr. Holmes.
Then you have nothing to lose by, do you?
Except a good night's sleep.
Watson, if you've caught a cold, it's your fault. You left the rugs behind.
Sorry, Holmes.
Is that 2 o'clock? Oh, yes.
Have a humbug.
Look!
your instructions, we locked every door so as to lead him into the back. And I'm very glad to see you have the rascal. Now, I hope, gentlemen, that you will come in and partake of some refreshment.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. The hour is rather late. Good night.
Good night.
Come, Watson, we have work to do.
Work? What work?
Lestrade, if you will come round to Baker Street tonight at 6 o'clock. Good night, Lestrade.
Come along now.
Buongiorno. Casi come questi è importante.
Ecco, signor Holmes.
Grazie, signore. Morning, Watson. Ah! Yes, Watson.
Well, what do you think of Lestrade?
Dad.
Come in.
Is Mr. Sherlock Holmes here? Ah. I fear I am a little late, but the trains were very awkward.
No matter.
Gentlemen, you said in your telegram that Mr. Hudson had given... Did he also tell you just how much my wife paid for it?
No, he did not.
Well, sir, I am an honest man, though not a very rich one, and she only gave 15 shillings for it, and I think you ought to know that before I take the £10 from you that you offered in your telegram.
Oh, your scruple does you much honor, Mr. Sandford, but I've stated my price, and I shall stick to it.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Holmes. That's very myself.
Sixth Napoleon.
I contacted Mr. Sandford by telegram.
Very, very kind of you, and thank you so much. Yes, and I'm very pleased I'm here. Thank you so much. Oh, my bad.
Gentlemen, allow me to introduce you to one of the most...
Rivals that of Maskelyne himself.
Oh, this surpasses it. The Borgia pearl's been missing since it disappeared from the Prince of Colonna's bedroom in the Dacre Hotel over a year ago.
As you may remember, Lestrade, I was consulted upon the case at the time. Observed, immediately became intrigued. The Princess of Colonna's maid, for some time, had been one Lucrezia Venucci. Suspicion fell on her, and it was proved that she had a brother in London, but we failed to trace any connection between them. Beppo was the connection. He had been courting Lucrezia Venucci for some time.
Where did you get that?
Papa Venucci.
Oh, I see.
When the Venucci Beppo stabbed him, he then fled into the warehouse and took refuge in the drawing room. He knew he only had moments in which to conceal the pearl, which would otherwise be found on him when he was searched. Among all the plaster casts drying that day, he made for a batch of 6 that had been earmarked for Morse Hudson. Vengeance accosted him, and this time...
It's our visit to Chiswick.
Exactly, Watson. That left only the Reading bust. I bought it in your presence from the owner. And there it lies.
I've seen you handle a good many cases in my time. But I don't know that I ever knew... Down tomorrow, there's not a man from the oldest inspector to the youngest constable who wouldn't be glad to shake you by the hand.
Thank you. Thank you.
È finita, Lucrezia.